Now, why I played that at the beginning will be quite clear to you in a few minutes. That, of course, is our tribute to Big Red and Chris Barber, who was a frequent guest of this show over the years. Well, we got so much to share with you today. You're watching Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden, from a snowy Ottawa area here on Tuesday, February 3rd already. Yeah, it is. Having a great time. I want you to enjoy this broadcast. We're going to have a good time today. And I've got two broadcasts to do today, actually. I think the second one, we'll talk about that later. We're going to record it for tomorrow because I think we'll get a bigger audience that way. But we'll be right back with more of the news that you need to know.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
Your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law.
But we also need to resolve to resist.
Okay. We'll do it live. Okay. No. We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
And we're doing it live as we do every year on Krayden's Right. The show is Stand on Guard. Please give me some help. I'm not kidding. We definitely need your support in terms of liking and subscribing. We need more subscriptions. We lost a lot of subscriptions in December. I don't think half of you even know you lost your subscription. If you unsubscribe because you hate my guts or you don't like what I'm saying, that's fair. Okay, that's fair game. But if you don't know it, if YouTube is unsubscribing you and you don't know it, do something about it today and like and subscribe to the station. I can't go on without your support. You know the issues we covered in 2025. Censorship, surveillance. We're going to continue to cover those. We did more reporting on Universal Ostrich Farms than just about anybody else. I wasn't on the scene, so I have to tip my hat to Rebel News because they had up to 2 reporters at the farm at one time or another, and of course they were there. But we did lots of interviews. We did lots of interviews with people who were there, not just Katie, but the people who were there, supporters. We did a lot of work on that. We continue to do work on election fraud, and we're going to be talking about that today. And hang on to your hats. We will be talking about the EIN files. I can't say the word, apparently. If you're a big station, yeah, you can say it, but I'm not a huge station. Hope to be someday. But let's call them the Bernstein files or the Frankenstein files. Either one of those, you know what I'm talking about. The files that are finally being released, even though it's not happening at the rate a lot of people were expecting. And is this it? We'll talk about those a bit later. But I want to talk about a couple of things at the beginning here. And I just find this fascinating. Hey, Bill Blair. Remember Bill Blair as the open borders minister? Then he was defense minister. Lousy job in both. While Bill Blair was the so-called borders czar, they created a ministerial position for him. He allowed more people to cross the border illegally than any other such cabinet minister ever. So where's Bill Blair going? You say, well, Billy is off to the races. No, he's off to, yes, here it is. Let's listen to CTV News report this.
On the international stage,
let's try again.
MP Bill Blair will be resigning his Toronto seat in the House of Commons to become Canada's new High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. Blair is a former cabinet minister and has served in a number of public safety roles, including chief of police in Toronto. In a statement on social media, Blair thanked his constituents, saying, quote, "Serving the people of Scarborough Southwest as your member of parliament has been an incredible privilege." And with me now is Ralph Goodall, former High Commissioner to the UK and former Liberal cabinet minister. Mr.
We can do without Ralph. And of course, we all remember Ralph Goodall. Looking good, Ralph. The former member from Regina Center. He was a powerful cabinet minister under Jean Chrétien. He was the perennial liberal from Saskatchewan. At times, the only liberal the Liberals could ever elect in that province. He was the outgoing High Commissioner to the UK, and Bill Blair is going to fill his shoes. I have to say, Bill does not look well, and I don't wish him well. Excuse me. I don't wish him ill. I wish him well in terms of his health. I don't wish ill on any political opponent or somebody I disagree with. I hope they're in good health. He does not look well, though, and it's worrisome. So he's gone. But what does that indicate to me? And we'll get to this in a second here. But I see a lot of people are saying, oh, uniparty, uniparty, uniparty. Well, there might be a uniparty in Ottawa. I haven't really decided on that yet. I know the Conservative Party Canada is always a better choice than the Liberal Party or the New Democrats. It just is. I know there's some similarities at times I don't like, but in terms of who's going to govern closest to what I like, which is less government. The less government, the better. That government which governs least is best, as Henry David Thoreau and Thomas Jefferson said, and people disagree on who said it first. Okay, but it is incredible to watch what's going on, and people are saying that Pierre Poilievre, just after getting 87.4% support in a leadership review in Calgary last week at the Conservative Party of Canada National Policy Convention, why is Poilievre supporting the grocery rebate? Well, I can tell you why he's supporting it. That's not an indication of the uniparty. Being in lockstep on giving billions of dollars to Ukraine, well, that might indicate a uniparty phenomenon. But Poilievre has no choice but to support this grocery rebate because we're heading into an election. And what do you think is going to be the first thing out of Mark Carney's mouth? At every campaign stop, Pierre Poilievre would not support our efforts to give you some money back on your groceries, to help you out with your food. Pierre Poilievre stood in the way. That's exactly what's going to happen. That's why Poilievre's supporting this. That might be obvious to a lot of you, but apparently to some of you, maybe it isn't. But that's why he is supporting this, and he really doesn't have a chance. I'm seeing a lot of people complain about former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, whom I worked for in his leadership campaign to become, first of all, the leader of the Canadian Alliance. I worked on his campaign. I knew Stephen Harper very well. Stephen Harper really got mad at me one time when I wrote a column for the Calgary Herald. I think this was about 2004, 2005. So we're talking 20 years ago now. Harper was not yet Prime Minister. That was a year or two away. And I wrote a column saying no left turn. It was there was a Conservative Party convention coming up, and I suggested Harper was in danger of moving the party to the left. And boy, did I get it for that. I had my media credentials stripped. I couldn't go to the next party convention in Montreal. I had to find another media sponsor to do that. Anyway, it's all history now. But people are complaining that Stephen Harper has been co-opted to sell federalism along with former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien. All I can say is that what do you expect from a former Prime Minister? Stephen Harper has a lot invested in federalism. He was the Prime Minister of this country. He's got a huge pension as a former Prime Minister. He has the prestige of being the former Prime Minister of Canada as an elder statesman. Do you really think he's going to support Alberta independence? Not at this stage in his life. No. And not with everything he has invested in it. But of course, it looks like he's been co-opted. It certainly looks that way. When he's out there, having a great time with Jean Chrétien, the two of them used to spar in question period. But, that's where we are. So why do I think we're heading into another election this year? Well, Mark Carney's given indication he wants to. The Conservative Party of Canada is preparing full scale. If you get their emails, and no, I'm not a member of the Conservative Party of Canada. I'm a member of no political party. As a journalist, I don't think I should be. I know I shouldn't be. But if you read the emails coming from party headquarters for the Conservatives, they are anticipating an election as early as the spring, possibly early summer. And I'm hearing the same thing. Let's put it this way. I'm hearing the same thing. And why? Because Mark Carney knows Canada is on the verge of economic collapse. We talked about this yesterday. We don't have any gold reserves. The dollar could collapse within a couple of days. We are in danger of losing our free trade agreement with both the United States and Mexico. We have debt that is even worse per capita, national debt that is worse per capita than even the United States. So why am I saying that Mark Carney wants an election? He wants a majority government before he can be the so-called victim of another Great Depression, which is potentially coming upon us. I don't want to be a crisis geek here, or somebody who's putting out information just to shock or surprise or horrify people. But the indications are there that we're headed for a financial collapse, much like 1929. And you know what happened in 1929, 1930? The Prime Minister of Canada in 1929 was Mackenzie King. He lost the election, Liberal Mackenzie King, if I have to tell you, to R.B. Bennett in 1930, a Conservative Party leader. And it was still called the Conservative Party at that time. That's before the merger with the Progressives and all that. He was the last Conservative Party Prime Minister before Stephen Harper, put it that way. So people didn't know in 1930 that they were in the Great Depression. They knew there was a stock market crash in 29. They knew the indicators were bad, the economic indicators were bad. But we know in hindsight, of course, that the Great Depression started in November 1929 with the precipitating event being the stock market crash. That wasn't the only cause of it, obviously. It was overproduction, underconsumption, tariffs around the world, closed markets, lots of reasons for the Great Depression. But people didn't know exactly when it started, when they were there. You never do. When you're in the midst of history, you don't always know you're in the midst of history happening. So who gets blamed for the Great Depression? Not Mackenzie King, but R.B. Bennett, who's from 1930 to 1935 as Prime Minister of Canada. He just watched the country go through the Great Depression. They called them, the cars that couldn't run anymore because people couldn't afford parts or gas. They were wheeled around by horses. They called those Bennett buggies. And I tell you, when I was campaigning for a friend of mine in Saskatchewan, I would go to doors where people would still say, I'm never voting Conservative because of R.B. Bennett and what he did to Canada. So that was an effective talking point for the Liberal Party of Canada. They used it for years. But that's why Mark Carney wants an election. That's precisely why Mark Carney wants one. Now, I want to go to a clip here from my good friend, Aviva Fry. And he explains what's going on with this class action suit against the Freedom Convoy. And of course, the two most prominent representatives of that Freedom Convoy remain Tamara Lich and Chris Barber. And here's Aviva Fry, a former Quebec lawyer who's moved down to Florida, but still obviously has his ears open for Canadian news. Here's him trying to explain what's going on, because it's possible the class action suit could be thrown out by the judge because of some very suspicious behavior on the part of the lawyer representing the class action plaintiff. So let's listen to this.
Canada, you do remember that this woman named Zexi Li, a young Chinese student in Canada, sued the trucker convoy along with some restaurants in a class action lawsuit for $290-300 million. It started off at first for $10 million, I think, and then it ballooned to $300 million. Class action, and as you all know, the steps to getting a class action certified, the first step is to get the class recognized and to get certification to file the class action. They have not yet gotten to that point, despite this file being years in the making. And Zexi Li people were accusing her because she's Chinese of being funded by the Chinese government, whatever. And I haven't found any meaningful evidence to substantiate that allegation. Others say that she's, funded by the liberal government. One thing that is clear is that if she's not a willing, deliberate tool, proxy entity of the liberal government, she's certainly filling that function. And she filed this $10 million class action against the trucker convoys because they interrupted the downtown core. They upset people. If you don't remember this, I'll bring it up, just a quick article which will summarize where we're at on this. Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. This is the news of the day. Actually, we won't even get into that just yet. Let me bring this back out. Suing for all sorts of damages, harassment, noise, trauma, yada, yada, yada. The lawyer in that file who was representing Zexi Lee is a guy named Paul Champ. And Nomen S. Omen, dude is not a champ. This is sort of like the ironic name for an individual. I've had my issues with Paul Champ for a very long time. He's a hack of a lawyer, an activist of a lawyer. This lawsuit was always clearly and only intended to be punishment, abuse of the judicial process to go after the truckers, to go after the organizers, to try to bankrupt them. Now, back in the day, he put up a tweet which is no longer there for whatever the reason, and I was mocking this guy for talking about causing distress of the truckers. And I wrote, yeah, cause distress. Yeah, with hugs, smiles, and bouncy cancels, get bent, Paul Champ. Then Paul Champ replies, the Public Order Emergency Commission, the federal court, and at least a dozen criminal trials have all concluded that the convoy obstructing Ottawa streets for 3 straight weeks caused significant disruption and distress to families, seniors, disabled, and workers. Get stuffed. That's gross. And I had to retort to Mr. Champ that perhaps the distress was caused by his client, Zexi Lee, that's her on the bottom right there, the plaintiff in this class action suit. Perhaps the distress was caused by her throwing frozen eggs off high-rise buildings onto the trucker protesters who were parked on public streets below. And if you had forgotten about that, Viva forgets nothing. Listen to her testimony during the Rouleau Commission, which was the political tribunal they set up within the year and a half after invoking the Emergencies Act to determine whether or not it was warranted under the circumstances, or at least to analyze the circumstances under which the Emergencies Act was ordered, invoked, and that Commissioner Rouleau concluded that it was, justified. A federal court and Court of Appeals unanimously declared otherwise. We'll get there. This is Zexi Lee talking about how she assaulted people during the trucker protest.
Can you describe what you mean by the egg throwing?
Well, there were very large trucks parked everywhere. And in some of these instances, they were parked right next to some high-rise condo buildings. And as a result, some people may have gotten some cartons of eggs and, had their little retaliation in frustration, because really, what else could they do?
What else could they do? The up talk is annoying. The vocal fry is annoying. That's the plaintiff in the class action lawsuit seeking $300 million from the truckers. And Paul Champ, the lawyer in that, let me see where this one's about Paul Champ. When I say that he's a liar, he's a liar. When I call someone a liar, by the time I've called them a liar, it's because I have obtained definitive conclusions based on conduct that they are a liar. Do you remember that incident where this member of provincial parliament, Joel Harden, claimed that he was punched in the face by protesters while he was protecting trans rights and trans kids, and then footage came out of the jackass smashing his bullhorn against his own face? And I said, oh, look, here's the moment you smashed yourself in the face where you had that metal piece right under your eye. This was Kareem Assad who showed the slow down version. Paul Champ came in and said, no. I know that we've got video footage now of this guy, what was his name? Joel Harden. A scandal. The man took to social media to claim that he had been punched in the face by far-right protesters because he's a lying sack of crap who happens to be a member of provincial parliament for the NDP. I'm fairly certain.
Well, we'll leave it at that, but that's the legacy of Paul Champ. Now, want to get to another news item here, which I think is very important, actually. And I want to get to my X page here. So, as I mentioned yesterday, we are calling on the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Heath MacDonald, to step down, please. And as I write in my X yesterday, join the growing chorus that is demanding the immediate resignation of Agriculture and Agri-Food Minister Heath MacDonald for gross neglect of his duties and responsibilities as a Minister of the Crown, directly responsible for the outrageous violations of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Canadian Constitution, especially with regard to the illegal behavior of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency at Universal Ostrich Farm. Yeah, that's quite a mouthful, but we are demanding it. And if anybody says, oh, you're wasting your time, David. No, we're not. Every time we can raise the profile of this minister and outline exactly how he's failed, it's good for Canada. And it's good for Universal Ostrich Farms. And this is a letter here that Katie Pasitne has drafted. We are going to be discussing this later today in probably a tape show with Katie, with former Agriculture Minister Jerry Ritz, with veterinarian Jeff Wilson, and Chris Barber will also be joining us on that show. So that will be either live today at 4 or we'll hold it to tomorrow's show. But thank you so much for listening to that. This is, I think is absolutely incredible what we need to do here. We got more to share. I've got so much to share with you today. And so I want to talk about, I can only show you a very small part of this because I have to be very, very careful in terms of, okay. Like I said, whoops. I want to, let's share the screen here. I find this interesting.
Todd Blanche says they're done. They've looked at all the documents. They've met their legal requirement, which is a bald-faced lie. Watch.
There are a small number of documents, as I said on Friday, that we're waiting for a judge to say we're allowed to release because of a protective order. But this review is over. I mean, we reviewed over 6 million pieces of paper, thousands of videos, tens of thousands of images, and which is what the statute required us to do. It's interesting. Leadership on the Hill, Congressman Massey, Senator Schumer are quick to complain. There is no way they have spent any time looking at the materials we produce, because I know the materials we produced them on Friday. By Saturday, they're already complaining about what we did. And by the way, apparently Massey and others wrote a letter to come and review unredacted materials. I didn't get that letter yet. They leaked it to the press before they actually sent it to me. But yeah, that's absolutely, totally fine. We have nothing to hide. We have nothing to hide. We never did. And our doors are open if they want to come and review any of the materials that we produced.
Except you do have a lot to hide, because as I just laid out, there's plenty of things you didn't follow the letter of the law and actually release. Massey also told me, of course they know that these 302 forms exist because the victims told them specifically that they'd given testimony to the FBI, the FBI agents who then filled them out.
So managed to get through that whole clip without mentioning the man's name. These are the Frankenstein files, the Bernstein files, otherwise known as the EPSTEIN files. Now, here's my issue with all of this. And I watched a lot of videotape on this yesterday. And like I said, it's a minefield playing this when you're not a mega station. It's a minefield because you could easily get demonetized, you get a strike because we're still dealing with that kind of censorship. But how is it possible with the information that's come out, with the files talking about people torturing young girls, let alone having sexual relations illegally. But some of the testimony is so shocking. The consumption of human parts. Can I say that? Can I say that? I hope so. I mean, this is shocking. Even in a jaded, evil world that we live in, I think most people are seeing this and they're saying, holy crap, is that what our government's top people are up to? Is that what our leaders are up to, our political leaders? And this cuts across Republican, conservative. Yeah, Mark Carney's in there. Mark Carney's in there. Pure Polly isn't, which doesn't surprise me at all. But Mark Carney, of course, his wife was good friends with Ghislaine Maxwell's sister. They used to party at the same mansion outside of London. We know that. Mark Carney's never denied it. He just won't talk about it. He was confronted about it at a campaign event. Remember that? My good friend was there. And by the way, he has been totally, I won't say destroyed, but he has been completely consumed to some degree by the federal government. But he went to that campaign event and dared to ask Mark Carney about the connection to this individual. And he starts coming out with this, and I think it was supposed to be French, but it sounded like a witchcraft incantation, which is what he does when he's really stressed out. He gets into this sort of, I'm going to cast the spell, the whammy on you for saying that. And that's so, but it should shock us. And my question is, with all of these people talking about these horrendous, horrible, toxic, unforgivable acts, nobody's going to get charged. Nobody's going to get charged. The FBI isn't going after anybody. Why? Well, I don't know. We've released the files and that's it. And it was just about this guy named Bernstein. Yeah. It was just about him. Nobody else owes us any explanation. The door is closed. The files, they're there. We put them all out there. So that's it. What a crock of shit. Excuse my language. I don't swear very often, and I think it's bad practice to do so. But I have to say, this is a pile of shit that suggests that there's nothing to see here, folks. People shouldn't get charged for this. It's just this one guy, and we know he self-deleted, by the way, which I'd never bought for a minute. I don't believe that. Yeah, the video recordings shut off. Oh, it does that every day at exactly that time. His brother says there's no way. There's actually people out there who insist he's still alive. I'm not going to get into that, but I don't for a minute believe he was going to self-delete. He had a lot of hope he was going to beat this thing. He had a lot of friends in high places. He had a lot of connections, a lot of contact, not just in the U.S., but in Israel. He had connections around the world. He had all the money he needed to hire the best lawyers. He'd already gotten a sweetheart deal previously on these kind of crimes. So he could expect to get it again. So I am not buying any of this. Not for a minute. Now, before I get into our recap again of what's going on in Georgia with Donald Trump, I invite you all to read my Substack. It's coming out about an hour after I get off the air. And it's all about how the mainstream media is in the hip pocket of Mark Carney. Now, I better share my... Better get back to my ex here because, this is a good point being made. So, and by I hope you saw Jeff Rath's interview and the CIA whistleblower. But I'm coming down to this. Yeah, massive gall. Yeah, watch that one too. If you watch one thing today, wow, look at the numbers we're getting for Heath MacDonald. It's just going up every hour here. And so Terry Glavin notes that, just to be clear, this isn't the media. It's a liberal-friendly association of independent media producers who have nothing to do with the mainstream new media. That's not true, Terry. It's true. This is not the Globe, and these people don't represent directly the Globe and Mail or CTV News. They represent the entertainment industry, the media entertainment industry. But here, let's listen to this. Okay. What are they?
Prime Minister, know that every person in this room and the 180,000 people who work in this industry have your back, just as we know that you have ours.
Okay, so what's my point? My point is that the entertainment industry, the entertainment media, and the news media are basically identical in their political objectives and their biases. There's no difference. These guys made a mini series that I don't think anybody really has watched on two gay hockey players. Fine, you want to make it? Great. Don't expect taxpayers to fund it. However, folk, the mainstream media is completely and unapologetically in Mark Carney's and previous to that, Justin Trudeau's woke corner on all of these issues, on so-called gender-affirming care, on the whole LGBTQ agenda, on abortion, on euthanasia. They're in his corner on all of these social issues. So there's no real difference anymore between the entertainment media and the news media. They're both the same. And that's what I argue in this column. So I invite you to read that. But I think let's watch a bit here. How does Mark Carney, they just love Mark Carney. It's amazing to me here. Here we go. Oh.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. Reynolds and Kyle, thank you for that introduction. I think south of the border, they'll be turning over that heated rivalry reference for some time. You might not want to stand too close to me for the next 24 hours. I want to begin by recognizing the Canadian Media Producers Association for hosting this incredible event to celebrate heated rivalry, a true made-in-Canada phenomenon. Et cette série témoigne à la fois du talent des Canadiens et Canadiens qui l'ont réalisé et de ce qui fait du Canada un pays formidable. Rachel and Jacob, congratulations on creating a story that has struck a chord with so many across this country around the world. Because of you, cottage season will have a whole new meaning this summer.
So, of course, they love Mark Carney at this event. And, he tells these jokes that are double entendre. What do you expect from a jackass who thought it was funny that hundreds of ostriches were killed, massacred by the ravenous Canadian Food Inspection Agency? He laughed about that. Oh, he laughed about the beluga whales. Poor beluga whale. He doesn't give a damn about anybody but him. He laughed about what this farm went through at the National Press Gallery dinner, just chortling away, having a great time, laughing at other people's misery. But he's celebrating a film paid for by you about these two amorous hockey players. And we're supposed to like that. And it's a true made in Canada phenomena. And it's a story that has struck a chord. With who? The LGBT community? This is supposed to be about what Canada is. But I'm telling you, whether it's the entertainment media or whether it's the news media, they're all in Carney's pocket. And that ain't going to change. I want to play this clip again because if you wonder why the mainstream media is so in tune with Mark Carney in Canada and so in tune with the Democrats in the States, listen to this.
I think the dislike of and anguish over social media is just growing and growing and growing. And it's part of our problem, particularly in democracies, in terms of building consensus around any issue. It's really hard to govern today. You can't, there's no, the referees we used to have to determine what's a fact and what isn't a fact are kind of, been eviscerated to a certain degree. And people go, and that people self-select where they go for their news or for their information. And then you just get into a vicious cycle. So it's really, really hard, much harder to build consensus today than at any time in the 45, 50 years I've been involved in this. And there's a lot of discussion now about how you curb those entities in order to guarantee that you're going to have, some accountability on facts, et cetera. But look, if people go to only one source and the source they go to is sick and, has an agenda and they're putting out disinformation, our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to just, hammer it out of existence.
So the First Amendment, which guarantees free speech in the United States and is a model for all countries calling themselves democratic, just throw it out so we can get rid of these dissenting voices, John Kerry says. And John Kerry, of course, former senator, former Secretary of State, former Democratic presidential nominee. This is how he feels. Former climate czar.
What we need is to win the ground, win the right to govern by hopefully having, winning enough votes that you're free to be able to implement change.
That's the big trick and the really, really tricky question right now, because there is out there a deliberate undermining of mainstream media. There are the conspiracy theorists, there are the social media drivers who are trying to do everything they can to keep people in their little filter bubbles, to prevent people from actually agreeing on a common set of facts, the way, the CBC and CTV, when they were our only sources of news, used to project across the country at least a common understanding of things. Any government that chooses to step up and say, well, this is the mainstream view, will, if we're not careful, actually compromise those organizations as being mouthpieces for a mainstream view that people on the fringes are exactly. So how do we actually shift that? I think.
Okay, who's bought and paid for? The mainstream media are bought and paid for. CBC gets entire budget through taxpayer-funded money, $1.4 billion annually. That's going up to $1.5 billion. The mainstream media outside of CBC is heavily subsidized, and we have demonstrated that, and we'll demonstrate how much. Overall, we're looking at what? We're looking at about $2 billion in subsidy to keep the mainstream media regurgitating liberal government talking points. Now, I want to get to the last issue here. Some people, I understand, didn't quite get this, because we've been reporting for quite some time on in fact, I was one of the first reporters to talk about how voting machines were corrupt and were stealing elections. I talked about this way back when I was a reporter for the Daily Caller. It was one of the first stories I ever wrote. And of course, that whole thing has been very, very delicate, because there's been legal action, there's been lawsuits, there's been billions of dollars in settlements. But at the World Economic Forum, Donald Trump alluded to something moving on this.
It's a war that should have never started, and it wouldn't have started if the 2020 U.S. presidential election weren't rigged. It was a rigged election. Everybody now knows that. They found out. People will soon be prosecuted for what they did. It's probably breaking news, but it should be. It was a rigged election. Can't have rigged elections. You need strong borders, strong elections, and ideally a good press. I always say.
Okay, so there are people who have been saying for quite some time that if the United States goes into Venezuela, it's not for the drugs. We know that. Not even primarily for the oil, although that's obviously an issue here. It's to end the influence of voting machines. And I'm even hesitant to talk about the name of the company. But we have reported how in the 2024 election, Donald Trump's people, which included Elon Musk, isolated the source of the election interference in Serbia, and they wiped it out. They stopped it. No, I don't mean they sent a drone over to bomb them out. They stopped the transmission. Elon Musk was absolutely instrumental in that happening. So now, and since then, there has been follow-up investigation into exactly what happened in 2020. And I remember when, if you even suggested that there was election impropriety, that you were in trouble. So let's have a look at what's happening in Georgia right now.
FBI agents are going through materials found today during a search of the Fulton County, Georgia election office. That search is said to be related to the 2020 election. Correspondent David Spunt has details tonight. Good evening, David.
Brett, good evening. FBI agents are still on site at the records warehouse for the Fulton County, Georgia Board of Elections. The matter is sealed before a court, meaning details are limited, but we can report this is related to the 2020 presidential election. Sources tell Fox News that agents retrieved documents, phones, and computers after a judge signed a warrant. President Trump has long made Georgia, and specifically Fulton County, a target of his complaints relating to the 2020 election. Shortly after that election, Trump spoke to Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, and said he needed 11,780 votes to win the state. At the time, Raffensperger said he felt pressure from Trump and denied any widespread election fraud. He continues to deny it to this day. Now, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis brought state criminal charges against then former President Trump and others in 2023 for conspiracy to overturn the election. But her prosecution, Brett, was eventually derailed completely after it was revealed she had an intimate relationship with the top prosecutor on her team, and it could have tainted the case. Late last year, a judge dismissed the case in its entirety. Now, Brett, last month, the Justice Department sued Fulton County, Georgia, seeking access to 2020 voting records after state officials allegedly failed to respond to a subpoena. Fox News has learned the head of the FBI's Atlanta field office was recently forced out in recent days, but it's unclear, Brett, if this is all related.
So clearly there's something going on in Georgia. Investigation. They're finding some vast irregularities in the voting. I'll put it that way. In terms of mail-in ballots weren't even folded. They weren't even folded. How is it possible to send a mail-in ballot in an envelope when it's not even folded? 97% response for Joe Biden. Something was happening. And I hope and pray they get to the bottom of this. But this goes back for decades. We have been talking about this and the danger of this influencing voting. And this is how old this is.
Owned by Venezuela could be allowed to take over one of this country's top voting machine firms. Venezuela, of course, led by Hugo Chavez, working to change the views of most South American countries, move to the left. Critics of the deal say our nation's very democracy is now for sale without anyone doing a thing about it. Kitty Pilgrim reports.
Now that, of course, is from a 2006 Fox Business News report with Lou Dobbs, who is unfortunately no longer with us. We miss Lou's commentary and reporting. But that's 20 years ago. We have been discussing this. We have been analyzing it. We've been trying to figure out what's going on. Maybe we're at the verge of discovering what that is. Which brings us back to what's happening in Canada. Voters might be going to the polls this year. I predict they will be. And Mark Carney is going to pull a fast one. He's going to try to pull a fast one. And it's going to be elbows up. It's going to be against, the election will not be against pure poly. It'll be against Donald Trump again. Hopefully there'll be enough common sense and intelligence amongst those baby boomers who voted for Trump, who voted for Carney and the Liberals the last time to recognize that they're being played. And believe me, Poilievre does not want to fight this election with Mark Carney against Donald Trump. He will become irrelevant if he does that. Talk about the corruption in the Carney government. Talk about what the Carney government is absolutely failing to do. That's where Pierre Poilievre has to go in this election. Well, we're going to have a great show for you tomorrow. I know you guys can't wait. And what a discussion we're going to have. And yes, we will let you know what's going to happen. We've got a great cast, a great panel. And if I don't show it live this afternoon, we'll have it for you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern time. Thank you for watching today, folks. God bless. God speed to all of you. Keep up the fight. Keep the fight up and keep up the good work. And thank you for all of you who support this station as you do. And we're going to continue to fight the censorship and surveillance of the Carney government in whatever form it takes. Thanks for watching. Thank you for sharing this station with your friends and family. Thank you for hitting that like button, because I tell you, we are fighting back in a way I've never had to before, because I'm going to keep this station on the air. I'm going to keep fighting for freedom. I'm going to keep fighting for justice and truth. And I am damn determined to resist this Carney government in any way possible as it encroaches upon our individual freedom. And it will continue to do that, mark my words. I'll be back again tomorrow. Same time, same place. 10 a.m. This has been David Krayden, broadcasting live from our nation's capital in Ottawa. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow.